My name is April Lepta and I'm 58 years old.
And tell me, why did you agree to do this interview to share your interview with me today? What is it you'd like to share for us to know about you?
I'd like to share my experience with EV, domestic violence, and how it affects us as women and or men.
Well, I know that's a very sensitive topic, and again, we really appreciate you sharing with us. And that's why I wanted to interview you, because I have heard your story several times. So hearing somebody else's story and seeing the other end of it is very important. So thank you again for sharing that.
When I was around 18 years old, I had I was in a relationship, and I wasn't sure if I was able to, have babies or not. So I went into the doctors, and they were doing some exams on me, and they found out that inside I had my fallopian tubes were clogged up, and my cervix was tilted to the side a little bit. So I just let it be for a while. But then when I got married and I wanted to have children, we tried and it just never happened. What happened was I was trying to get pregnant and I couldn't. So I went in and I did some surgeries, and I had the fallopian tubes, cleaned out, but it didn't work. So our next option was in vitro, which I tried. So it's very expensive. It was probably close to almost $100,000. We didn't have any insurance, so it was all out of pocket. You have to do a lot of visits. So I was probably back and forth anywhere from 20, 30 times.
Wow.
So what they do is they take the sperm from your husband and plant it in you, the eggs, and to see if it will take. So I went through that, and you have to do injections. That was going on maybe for like 2 to 3 months. So when it came time and they planted the egg in me, I had to go into the hospital when they did that and be put on this bed that tilts. So your head's down here and your feet are at the top, so that it takes. So I went to the doctors in Fresno, the hospital there, and they put me in the bed. So then after I finished, they said, give it 2 weeks. 2 weeks, you go take a pregnancy test and request diagnosis. I said, okay. So when that happened, I went and I took the pregnancy test. Prayed to God. My husband prayed, but it came out negative. So we just went to Plan B, which was adoption.
Now that's an interesting story. I don't know that there are many women that have gone the route in which you and your husband chose for adoption, and I find it fascinating. So tell us how you came about to you and your husband adopting your son.
So what we did, our plan was to go into Mexico to go adopt a baby out there. That was our initial plan. But I have an older sibling that she has, a lot of children. So she said, instead of going to Mexico and spending all this money, trying to be a baby, how about I give you one of my children? So my sister and my brother-in-law had a discussion. They agreed. She got pregnant. This was her baby, number 7.
Oh, it's her 7th child.
Her 7th child, yes. So with already knowing that this was going to be, or supposed to be her last child, so we were okay with her, putting him up for adoption with me and my husband to become his parents.
Okay.
And I went, and I was in Modesto. It was in Modesto. I was going from Fresno to Modesto often to go be with her and, just go to her doctor's appointments and everything and let them know that I wasn't going to be mommy and do all the paperwork that was needed. But then, when it came about a month into it, the father decided he didn't want to give his child up anymore. So I was upset, but then I had to tell myself too, it's their parental right to keep their own child. I shouldn't be selfish. Even though I was upset, my husband was upset too. But when the time came and she went into labor in January of 1994, she called me at 2 a.m. had her girlfriend call me and tell me, your baby's on the way, your son is on the way. I need you to get to Modesto as soon as possible. So I thought, oh, so in my mind, I'm thinking all these things. That either she already had the baby and she's touched him and now she's attached. When I get there, she's going to tell me that she had changed her mind. But I was just trying to pray on it and stay positive.
Yeah.
So I finally made it to Modesto. A lady came and picked me up at the Greyhound station. Took me and I asked her, has the baby been born yet? She said no.
Oh, wow.
I said, he's not. So your sister said he's waiting for mommy.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. So I went to the hospital. I got there, and I remember looking up at the clock. It was 5:15 p.m. on January 18th, 1994. At 5:20, this little boy came out.
Wow, he waited for you.
So he said, my sister was closing her eyes the whole time. I was able to be there and help deliver the baby. I got to cut the umbilical cord. I got to be the first one, everything. And so the nurse and the doctor almost fainted because she said you were waiting for mom and we didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And the same doctor that had delivered all her other children. So he knows that her baby usually come out pretty quickly when she goes into labor. And he was born sick, so he was in an incubator for about 10 days. And I was at the hospital 24/7 with him. I didn't want to leave, but I had to go shower, eat, do things, and then I would go right back. And that's how we became parents. And then, so we just have the one.
Okay.
We didn't
How old is he now?
He's 30.
He's 30. That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing. So with the whole process, from taking them home till today, at any point do you have any regrets or wish you had a do-over?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because whatever God's miracles give to you, you just embrace it. So no, I wouldn't change anything.
And then from when you brought him home up until maybe when you turned 18,
Yes.
was there any time where your sister and her husband changed their mind and wanted him back?
No.
No, that's
The only
amazing.
issue was that we did have a virtual agreement that they were not allowed to see him or meet him for the first year.
So if I may ask, at what age did you and your husband decide to let your son know that he actually wasn't your son? And in fact, his aunt was his mom.
Yes. Because of the adoption process, you have to have a social worker involved.
Right.
The social worker said, wait until he gets old enough to understand. Don't wait until he's an adult or gets older, she said, because as an experienced social worker, she's known a lot of parents that don't tell, or they refuse to tell, and the child rebels, and then the child's mad at them or hates them. They're not telling them.
Okay.
So when he was in first grade, we started questioning his last name.
Okay.
Because the process takes a while. Yeah, it takes a long time. So he was questioning his last name. Why doesn't he have the same last name as his daddy or as me? So we got a hold of the social worker to guide us. So she came and we had a discussion with him and we told him
So he was about 5 years old.
that, he was 5, almost 6, yeah. Then he said, very smart, he said, no. God took a piece of mommy and a piece of daddy and put me into Auntie's belly and made me, but with a piece of both of us. So
He said this at 5, 6 years old?
yes,
Wow.
so we were very, very smart. He was very intelligent.
He knew his mom.
So he knew that this is my mom, this is my dad.
Well, that's a beautiful story, and thank you for sharing this topic with us. And hopefully, there's some women out there that will actually find it very useful, because it's unfortunately more common than people know about, and knowing different options and what to do during that process is important. So again, thank you for sharing this topic with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Another part of your story that you had shared with me that I again found very telling and strong, and it was very traumatic, but you survived it. You've been married twice.
Yes.
And in those 2 marriages, you experienced 2 forms of domestic violence. And they were very different, and you survived both types. So if you don't mind sharing with us your experience with your first marriage.
So I was living in the Bay Area, Concord, California, and I was 15 years old. He was 16 when I first met him. Our language barrier was not the greatest because I'm English speaking, he was Spanish speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know a lot of Spanish, very minimal.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know any English. But I understood what he was saying and he understood what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
There was no like love at first sight or anything. Mm-hmm. But as the time went by, then like he started liking me more and I started liking him more. And he was actually a really nice guy. He would bring me gifts like, bracelets or a necklace. I remember he brought me a necklace one time, some earrings one time, flowers. So he was really, really nice. He had asked me if I would marry him at that time when I turned 16, but I had declined because I was still very young and I wanted just to focus on my school. But he was patient, he waited. He would come every so often to come and visit me. So when the time came and I did turn 18 and I graduated high school, he came to ask again. I took him up on his offer. I said, yes, I will marry you, I will go. So I moved from the Bay Area, Concord, to Fresno to be with him. And I remember we lived in this little tiny studio apartment, and this preacher man just came to our house and married us right out on our front steps in our yard. And I thought that was a little unusual because when you're young, you want your first marriage to be a white gown and a big, beautiful wedding.
Right.
But it's okay. So we got married. And then he was still really nice. He was very good to me. So I decided, because he was from another country, from Mexico, that I was going to help him fix his papers up so that I wouldn't lose him or he wouldn't be deported and I would be without a husband. So when that process finished and we did the interview and everything and we passed and he got his document, his visa, he changed. He changed like drastically. So what I mean by changing, he started becoming very abusive. I wasn't allowed to do anything. I was like a prisoner in my own home. I wasn't allowed to go outside the house at all. Like I wasn't even allowed to do the basic duties of checking the mailbox, throwing trash, going to do laundry, because our apartment did not have facilities for the laundry service. So I wasn't allowed to look at anybody. I had to always be with my head down, and I wasn't allowed to look to the left nor to the right at anybody. If I did, or if I smiled at somebody, I got a beating and accused that I had been cheating with that person or being with that person. So I got beatings often. I suggested maybe going somewhere to get help. He refused. So then I remember when the time came, he got upset at something that my sister had did, but I got the blame for it.
He came home and he smelled the smell of cigarettes or smoking. Somebody smoked in the house.
Yes.
And he assumed it was you.
He assumed it was me smoking. So he took out a gun and he loaded it and he put it to my face. And he told me, you better pray and ask God for all forgiveness of your sins because this is the day that you're going to go meet the Lord. So I told him, it's okay. Go ahead and pull the trigger. I told him you'll be doing me a huge favor because I would rather go live with the Lord than live with the devil. But his brother walked in on us and asked him, what are you doing? But I remember prior to my brother-in-law walking in, I told him, you're going to pull the trigger, do it front facing, front on. Don't wait for me to turn my back and try to walk away and be a coward and shoot me in the back. Just do it. Then that's when the brother walked in. When he took the safety off, the brother walked in and asked him, are you crazy? What are you doing? She's a woman. So the brothers stopped him. So I'm not sure if the brother would not have walked in, if he would have did it, or if he would have just chickened out and said, just never mind, and left. Because right away he got in the vehicle and he left. He didn't come back for days.
So tell me about the instance where I think you had one of the worst beatings or one of the last beatings you experienced with him.
Yeah.
And where the police was involved. Tell us about that.
It was May of 1988. We had gotten into an altercation. And I told him I didn't want to be with him anymore. I wanted a divorce. But prior to the May, I had tricked him into signing divorce papers. I had my nephews, 2 of my nephews were living with me, and I was their legal guardian. I had full custody of my nephews. So I told him that social services had sent me a letter that needed our signatures on it, saying that he was not the sole provider of my nephews. And he had nothing to do with these babies. So what I did, I took a social service paper that I had on my nephews and I put the divorce paper underneath it. And I carefully taped it with some invisible tape. So when I did that, he told me, if you're tricking me and these are divorce papers, I will come back and I will murder you. And I said, okay, no problem. I took the papers to the divorce lawyer. I paid my $150 back then. That's what it cost. He got his copy in the mail. So I went into my room and I picked up the phone and I dialed 911 and then I set the phone on the floor. He went and he grabbed a knife. He came and I was trying to escape and I couldn't get the front door open. So as I was opening the downstairs window in the living area to scream or try to get out, I just felt somebody grab my arm, turn me around, and then I just felt a punch to my face on each side. And then he pulled me by my hair and threw me in the room on the bed. And he just ripped my nightgown open, and with the knife, he just started beating me. It felt like it was an eternity, but it wasn't. It maybe was just a matter of minutes. I saw lights flashing through the bedroom window. I saw somebody ask, what's happening? What's going on here? He looked up and I just looked back and I saw 2 officers. And I just remember looking up to the sky and asking God, thank you, dear Jesus. Thank you, Lord. So he stood up, I stood up, both of us bloody. He hugged me and he told the officer, nothing, we're just talking. And I said, oh, is that the way that we communicate these days? So he said, I need you to open the front door. I told the officer the front door's stuck. I'm not able to get it open. So I have to kick the door in. I said, okay. When he did, he came, and one of the officers was huge. I want to say he was at least 6 foot or something, and a big officer, and then one shorter. So the officer told me, can I borrow one of your dresses, ma'am, or one of your nightgowns that you have on? He said, I'm going to be a woman right now. So he went out and he uncuffed my husband and told him, you like to beat women, don't you? He said, I'm going to give you one chance. You're going to get one punch. He said, and you're going to use all your might and you're going to punch me. He said, but when I return it, he says, because I will return it and I will fight back. He said, you will end up in the next apartment because you will go through these walls. My husband just put his hands out and said, take me. So when the officers were leaving and they were taking him to, I asked the officer, who saved me? Who called you guys to come here? So I want to thank them. He said, you saved your own life, ma'am. I said, excuse me? He said, your phone, you never hanged it up. He said, you saved your own life. He said, we only got one phone call. Wow. And it came from this apartment. Wow. He said, so you saved yourself. He said, so he got locked up. I went to go press charges. And I ran into his brother and sister-in-law. They begged me not to, and they promised me that he would never bother me again. So I just went ahead and got a restraining order, just in case. But he never did. He didn't come back. He didn't bother me. He never tried to contact me. And I did see him maybe 5-6 years later, but he didn't bother me. He didn't bother me. The only thing that he did do, he did apologize. He did apologize, all those years later. And I just told him it's over. Just go. And I haven't seen him since.
So tell us about your second marriage and how long after your first marriage did you get married?
So when I divorced in 1988, I decided I was single for a while. So I stayed single for 3 years. I met my second husband in 1991, February 1991, at a club. I was not interested. I was not looking. But he saw me, and for him, it was love at first sight. By then, my Spanish had improved a lot. I kept running
So he's also Spanish?
Yeah, he's
Spanish
also
speaking.
Mexican, yeah, Spanish
Okay.
speaking.
If I may ask, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
What is your ethnicity?
I'm Caucasian. I'm German.
German. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
German.
I think it helps.
Yes.
So no, you didn't speak Spanish before either of your marriages.
No.
Okay.
No. So I kept running into him. Eventually, I agreed to go on a date with him. He was very nice, super sweet. He was even nicer than the first husband that I had. He would just wine and dine me. Anything I wanted, I got. We got married. We met in February 1991. By October of 1991, he was already proposing to me.
Wow.
So I had to decline the first proposal, which is kind of funny because the way he went about it was not what I had fantasized. I was working at a fast food, and he came and he said, "Can you take your break? I need to talk to you in the parking lot." I went out and he proposed to me in the parking lot of a Taco Bell during my shift, which I thought was very unusual. So I said no. Politely said no.
Jeez, I wonder why.
He said, "Well, what do I do with the ring? I already bought it." I said, "Well, then return it." I'm sorry. So he said, "Okay." So I guess he came up with a master plan. So he took me out to dinner. So can I take you out? We went out to dinner, nice dinner and everything. And then he proposed the proper way.
How long after that?
It was maybe about a month.
A month later.
Maybe about a month later. Yeah, because it was already by November at this point. So about a month later, so I said yes. I was like, he's very nice. I was tired of being alone. But it was the same thing that he was from Mexico. And I agreed to fix his papers so that he wouldn't be deported the same.
Did he ever mention to you that he needs your help with
No.
prior to getting married?
No.
Okay.
He said, "I came over here without it. I can leave without it." I was the one because he did get deported. He got caught working illegally at a job site and he couldn't get back. So I was the one that said, "I want to help you. I want to get your papers so I don't go through that again of losing my husband." He said, "Yes, that's fine."
So
no
you
problem."
offered it.
So I offered it.
Gotcha.
Yes. But the same thing happened to me, unfortunately. As soon as he received his documents and he did all that, he wasn't physically abusive, but he was very verbally abusive. He was very manipulative. Everything I said or I did in his eyes was wrong. Anything I did, I got criticized. Parenting was wrong. My job and the way I approached my job, everything was wrong. Verbally abusive. So I talked to him. I communicated with him and I told him how he was making me feel. If we could go to counseling. We had been married by this time when I suggested marriage counseling. We were probably married a good 8 to 10 years by then. Yeah, about 10 years by then, because my son now was in like the second, third grade. Yeah. He said he didn't need any help. That accept him the way he was or don't accept him. But I just stayed there because I thought, it's not as bad verbally than physically or emotional abuse, But I still stayed. I still stayed in the relationship.
And then at some point in your marriage, you found out that not only has he been unfaithful, but he had a long-standing relationship with another woman.
I found out that he was living a double life, a second life. He had multiple women, but he was in a long-term relationship with this one specific woman.
And how long were you married when you found out about her?
We were going on our 20-year wedding anniversary. It was about 6 months shy of us completing 20 years of marriage. So I received an anonymous phone call asking me if I was married to him and if I spoke English. And I said yes. This person said, I am a daughter to this woman. And I'm not sure if you're familiar or not, but your husband has been with my mom for many years now. And he says that you guys are not together anymore. When I confronted him about it, he did not deny it. I said, are you willing to leave her? I was still willing to forgive him and try to get help for the verbal abuse, and not just call it quits right away, because in 1999, we remarried.
So you had
we had another marriage. We had a church wedding, a huge church wedding in his town.
This was in Mexico?
Yes, we got married in Mexico. We had the formal gown and big party, and it was beautiful. So he said no, he wasn't willing to leave her. He was in love with her, but he loved me, but he was no longer in love with me. So to get an understanding, he said it was because, unfortunately, I had gained weight. He was no longer attracted. So I said, okay. He said, what are you going to do? What do you want to do with me? I said, I'm just going to get a divorce. We went to the lawyers. We went to a lawyer stuff. We discussed it. And so the only regret I have with that one, I walked away clean.
Yeah, so just to elaborate on that, you guys had accumulated quite a bit of properties and other possessions. So when you say you walked away, it wasn't from just one house or anything. You guys had accumulated quite a bit of properties.
We had our own home, very beautiful, in Clovis, California. We had 2 businesses, a restaurant and a landscaping business. We had rental properties. When the lawyer told me how everything was going to plan out, I didn't want to have to be responsible for any of the debt, because it was a very high amount. So I signed and I agreed to walk away. So I packed my stuff up. I got my son. I asked my son, because he was able to make his own decision.
How old was your son at that point?
He was 17. He was going to get ready to turn 18 in January that following year. So he was like 3 months shy of turning 18.
So no child support, no alimony?
No.
Nothing?
I just declined. I signed and declined. Yes. I let him and his lover keep everything. Because I told him, I'm walking away. There is no price to freedom. I do have one regret, is not fighting for what was initially I had worked for. I worked the whole 20 years. I contributed. So my only regret was not trying to at least fight it to get alimony or get something from our assets. But then I just said, God's going to deal with it. God will deal with it. I'm okay. I'll be okay.
So that leads me to my final question. What would you say, besides your son, what would you say has been the best part of your life up until now?
So I did benefit. I learned a second language. I gained a child, my son.
Yeah.
And I ended up applying for a job. I came to Tracy and I interviewed. And I was hired within an hour on the spot. They were like, come, let me show you your room. Come here, let me introduce you to my children. And you could tell the kids were a little curious because I could see them doing their homework and they kept looking at me like, is this going to be our new nanny? Yeah.
So you've been with that family?
So I've been with that family going, I just did 9 years in October.
Wow.
The little girl was 7, the little boy was 8. I will say 9 because a week later he did turn 9 years old. And now they're all grown up, teenagers, and getting ready to graduate.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But I'm very blessed. I might not have gotten what I deserved, financially in that marriage that I had created. But I'm more rich and I've gained so much more walking away and being the stronger person and with this job that I have. So it's not all about the finances.
You know, April, you're a really strong woman. I know sometimes women, we tend to say that to each other and it comes off just very ingenuine, but you truly have gone through a lot and you've survived.
Yes.
You're a survivor, right? So you're not a victim, you're a survivor. So we just, thank you again for sharing this. Hopefully somebody can take away from your experiences and learn from it and pull what they need to give them the courage to do what they need to for themselves. So thank you again for sharing your story.
Welcome.
I want to give you a hug.
Thank you.
Such an amazing story.
Thank you.
Thank you.